The scripture reading this morning is from the book of 1 Peter, chapter 3, verses 10 through 12. And I read, "For he that would love life and see good days, let him keep his tongue from evil and his lips from speaking guile. Let him turn away from evil and do right. Let him seek peace and pursue it. For the eyes of the Lord are upon the righteous, and his ears are open to their prayer. But the face of the Lord is against those that do evil." Thus ends the reading of the scripture. The title of my sermon today is "It's a Perfect Day." It was actually inspired by this comic strip. A few weeks ago, I was reading the Sunday edition of the Washington Post, which included the comic section, of course. There are a few comics I really enjoy, and one of them is Garfield. Now, for those of you that are familiar with Garfield, you know that he's a very famous, fun-loving, fictional cat that's rather grumpy and sneaky at times. His owner is a man named Jonathan, and Garfield is always playing practical jokes on John and their dog, Odie. The comic strip starts off with Garfield saying, "It's a perfect day." And I just thought that made a good title of a sermon. So, if you know Garfield, you know that there has to be more to it than that. And I'm going to come back to the rest of the story. I promise I will. But first, let's talk about what today is. June 19th, 2022. First of all, happy Father's Day to our one father, two fathers. But today's a day set aside to honor and celebrate all fathers and father figures that are important to us. And that's a good thing. Father's Day acknowledges and celebrates the contribution of fathers to their own families and to society at large. On this day, children get a chance to show their appreciation for their fathers and for all the men who've played an important role in their lives. Do you know the first day that Father's Day was celebrated was actually July 5th, 1908. It was in a West Virginia church. It was a Sunday sermon in memory of 362 men who had died in the previous December's explosions at the Fairmont Coal Company mines, referred to as the worst mining accident in U.S. history. But this was only a one-time commemoration. At that time in history, Father's Day was not yet recognized as an annual holiday. A year later, in May of 1909, a woman named Sonora Smart Dodd was sitting in a church in Spokane, Washington, listening to a Mother's Day sermon. She thought of her father, William Jackson Smart, a farmer and Civil War veteran who had raised Sonora and her 5 brothers by himself after his wife Ellen died giving birth to their youngest child. Sonora thought that fathers should get recognition too, so she asked the minister of the church if he would deliver a sermon honoring fathers on her father's birthday, which was coming up in June. Within a few months, Sonora had convinced the Spokane Ministerial Association and the YMCA to set aside a Sunday in June to celebrate fathers. She proposed June 5th, her father's birthday, but the ministers chose the 3rd Sunday in June so that they would have more time after Mother's Day to prepare their sermons. Thus, on June 19th, 1910, exactly 112 years ago today, the first Father's Day events commenced. Sonora delivered presents to the handicapped fathers. Boys from the YMCA decorated their lapels with fresh-cut roses, red for the living fathers, white for the deceased, and the city's ministers devoted their homilies to fatherhood. The widely publicized events in Spokane struck a chord that reached all the way to Washington, D.C., and Sonora's ideas put the celebration on the path to becoming a national holiday. But the holiday didn't catch on right away. In 1916, President Woodrow Wilson and his family personally observed the day. 8 years later, President Calvin Coolidge signed a resolution in favor of Father's Day, and it read, "To establish more intimate relations between fathers and their children, and to impress upon fathers the full measure of their obligations." In 1966, 50 years later, President Lyndon Johnson signed an executive order that the holiday be celebrated on the third Sunday in June. But it wasn't until 1972, just 50 years ago, under President Richard Nixon, that Congress passed an act officially making Father's Day a national holiday. Now, 6 years after that, Sonora died at the age of 96, so luckily she got to see the fruits of her efforts. With American history, you might think that a holiday recognizing men would be perfectly acceptable. After all, men dominated American society in the early 20th century. But in the United States, Father's Day was not immediately accepted when it was proposed. Mother's Day came first. It was officially recognized in 1914. So men in the early 1900s associated such a tribute as only for women and found the idea of a day recognizing them too feminine for their liking. Men viewed the idea of Father's Day as similar to Mother's Day, which was popular with florists. The men did not want a holiday that would domesticate their manliness with flowers and gift-giving. It is also written that they thought such holidays were simply a commercial gimmick to sell more products, often paid for by the father himself, and they were probably right about that. However, there were two economic events that pushed Father's Day forward. One was the Great Depression. With so many people pinching their pennies, the economy needed reasons for people to spend money. Father's Day was promoted by struggling stores as an occasion to get fathers some of the clothing and material goods that they needed. It was a way to invite people to get Dad the necktie or perhaps the pair of socks that he wouldn't buy for himself. Second was World War II. Men were on the front lines. The desire to support American troops and the war effort provided another reason to support and show appreciation for dads. The idea of fatherhood changed as well. Instead of being viewed as the feminine model with flowers, it became more of a day that celebrates what dads like to do, whether it's going fishing or hunting or riding go-karts. It focuses on the larger role that dads played with their children. Thankfully, the modern role of the father has now changed so that mothers and fathers are partners alike, each taking responsibility within the family life. I think that's the way it should be. Another great celebration for today, June 19th, 2022, is Juneteenth. It's one of the most important days in the history of the United States. It commemorates the end of slavery in our country. The name Juneteenth references the date of the holiday, combining the words June and 19th. It's also known as Emancipation Day, commemorating the emancipation of enslaved African Americans. Originating in Galveston, Texas, it's been celebrated annually on June the 19th in various parts of the United States since 1865. The day was officially recognized as a federal holiday just last year when President Joe Biden signed the Juneteenth National Independence Day Act into action. And did you know that today, June 19th, 2022, is also World Sauntering Day? Believe it or not, it is a thing. My research tells me that this holiday was formed by a man named W.T. Robb in 1979. It's thought to have started at the Grand Hotel on Mackinac Island in Michigan. This hotel has the longest porch in the world, measuring 660 feet. The whole thinking behind the day was to get people to slow down a little and take more note of the world around them. Sauntering, as Rob would say, is going from point X to point Z, which means you don't care where you're going, how you're going, or when you're going to get there. The idea, he said, was to stop and smell the roses and pay attention to the world around you. Jogging, in his view, was a grueling attack on the body. It drains all the joy out of movement by making each step as painful as possible. I'd have to agree with him there. Sauntering, the art of free movement from one location to another, was, in his view, unquestionably superior. Over the years, it gained a significant following. Other people began to see that Rob was onto something. Jogging might be what heart health professionals recommended, but it was draining people's lives of joy. Where was the fun in the activity? Where was the relaxation? Henry David Thoreau was quoted as saying, "The world around us is moving at such a hectic pace that we often forget to slow down and smell the proverbial roses. Even our walk is at high speed, pushing every inch of haste we can get out of what is otherwise the most leisurely mode of locomotion. It isn't just an opportunity for us to remember to walk. It is, more importantly, an opportunity for us to take a generally relaxed tack to the day and choose to saunter. So give yourself plenty of time today to saunter, and do so with the intent of relaxing and truly enjoying your journey wherever it is you're going. I think the world will be better for it, and you'll be happier for it. And did you know that today, the third Sunday in June, is also National Turkey Lovers Day? Who knew that was a thing? Established by the National Turkey Federation, it was felt that there was no need to wait until Thanksgiving to enjoy a delicious turkey. Thanksgiving may, in fact, be our favorite food holiday of the year, but it's all about the turkey in the end, so why should that delicious meat be relegated to only Thanksgiving? Turkey Lovers Day encourages you to break the mold and have turkey whenever you want it, because there's nothing civilized about having turkey just once a year. And the third Sunday in June of every year is also Bergfield Boxcart Bash Day, which is said to be a global celebration of the bonkers world of creating and designing non-motorized vehicles to careen down hills, navigate courses, and send engrossed crowds into raptures. It's a crazy, fun-packed commemoration of rustic racing at its finest. Now celebrated the world over, Bergfield Boxcart Bash Day, that is a mouthful, is an ideal excuse to get together with creative chums, hone your mechanic skills, and create a vehicular monster capable of leaving rivals in its wake. I would guess that there's no surprise that occurs on Father's Day. And interestingly enough, did you know that every June 19th is also World Martini Day? Yes, this cocktail, gin and vermouth, shaken, not stirred, and garnished with olives, has been a classic for many decades and is now one of the most favorite cocktails in the world. It's the favorite of many, including James Bond, John D. Rockefeller, Humphrey Bogart, Ernest Hemingway, Clark Gable, and Franklin D. Roosevelt. Interesting that it also occurs on Father's Day. And last but not least, every June 19th, believe it or not, is also National Garfield the Cat Day. Now imagine how surprised I was when I read this. But as we metaphysicians know, there are no such things as coincidence in life. It was obviously meant for me to read that comic strip a few weeks ago as I was beginning to work on my sermon for today. So why is June 19th the day we celebrate Garfield the Cat? Well, on this day in 1978, the first publication of Garfield was released. So each year there's an entire day set aside to celebrate this funny, lazy feline and the entertainment he continues to provide to engaged audiences and fans everywhere. Garfield hates Mondays. Who doesn't? Loves lasagna. Who doesn't? Eats too much. Who doesn't? Hates going on diets. Who doesn't? Likes being lazy. Who doesn't? And doesn't like getting up early. Who doesn't? Garfield the Cat holds the Guinness World Record for being the most widely syndicated comic strip, which is pretty impressive. The comic has been translated into 7 languages and is well recognized across many countries all over the world. You can see publications of Garfield in nearly 3,000 newspapers, magazines, and online journals. The popular book, Garfield at Large, made the New York Times bestseller list for 2 years. Publishing houses were sending in complaints over and over again because other authors couldn't get on the list due to Garfield the Cat. So my sermon starts and ends with the comic strip from Garfield. Let me share it with you. He says, "It's a perfect day." Well, almost. It could be a couple of degrees warmer. The floor could be a giant pillow. The ceiling could be a huge TV screen. And turning to John, he says, "And why aren't you a bacon sandwich?" To which John says, "Go away." I know you've all had days like that, right? With Garfield. Well, often we hear, and many of us say the expression, "have a good day." When we wish someone a good day, we're wishing for them 2 things. First, we're wishing that their day's events go smoothly and successfully. But secondly, and even more importantly, we're wishing for that person a sense of inner peace and well-being, even if things don't go smoothly and successfully. But of course, just wishing for all of that doesn't make it happen. People often don't have a good day. There's a children's book that I used to read to my daughter when she was a little girl. It was called Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day. It's very cute. If you haven't heard it or if it's been a while, Google it and you'll give you a laugh. You listen to the little boy talk about his adventures of the day and how everything turned out to be a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. We've all had days like that. So how can we avoid letting the day's events get us down? Let's go back to our scripture reading this morning. 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 10 through 12. "For he that would love life and see good days, let him keep his tongue from evil and his lips from speaking guile. Let him turn away from evil and do right. Let him seek peace and pursue it. For the eyes of the Lord are upon the righteous, and his ears are open to their prayer. But the face of the Lord is against those that do evil." In this passage, we see 2 essential things: the performance required for having a good day, and the power available to us for having a good day. First, let's look at the performance. Often you and I can't control the circumstances of our lives, but we can control our performance in the midst of these circumstances. We must control our tongues. As the scripture says, For he that will love life and see good days, let him refrain his tongue from evil, and his lips that they speak no guile. The Greek word for evil has to do with anything which is morally or ethically wrong, having hurtful or even destructive results. The Greek word for guile means deceit. Now, namely, what the scripture is telling us is that we need to be careful about what we say and how we say it. We must control our actions. The scripture says, let him turn away from evil and do right. The Bible often talks about sin. As metaphysicians, we do not accept the concept of original sin, whether we think of sin as an error in thinking. So to control our actions means to control our thoughts. Remember, everything begins in the mind. Thoughts produce actions, which produce results. To control our thinking is to control the results. The other requirement for having good days is to seek peace. The scripture says, let him seek peace and pursue it. In Matthew 5:9, Jesus said, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. We become children of God by our performance as peacemakers. At times, we all feel that we live in a world marked by hostility and violence. There have been many, way too many incidences of this lately. Shootings in schools, churches, places of employment, and yesterday afternoon at Tyson's Corner Center Mall. Now more than ever, it's important for each of us to do our very best to be a force for peace in the midst of all this chaos that we're dealing with. The foundation for being a peacemaker starts with being at peace with ourselves. It comes from within. When we possess this peace within, we can then go out and share this peace with others. As the scripture says, let him seek peace and pursue it. We are to live in peace with those around us. We are to seek it and we are to pursue it. We're to work diligently over and over again. Romans 12:18 says, if it be possible, as much as lieth in you, live peaceably with all men. The implication here is that there are some folks that will flatly refuse to be peaceful. Remember the words of Jesus. Basically, what he is saying is to go out and give it all we've got, have a good day, and share that good day with others. So how do we do all of this? This takes us to the second part of the scripture. For the eyes of the Lord are upon the righteous, and his ears are open to their prayer. The righteous meaning those who are right with God, right with the God within. God, this infinite intelligence, this power is within you. Remember this power. Believe in this power. Trust in this power. Maybe things aren't always the way you want them every day. And yes, you can't always avoid pain and heartache, but even days marked by trouble and disappointment can be good days. You can still have peace and strength in spite of the dismal circumstances surrounding you. You can have a good day. You can even have a perfect day. So today, June 19th, 2022, first of all, let's have a happy Father's Day. Say a special prayer for all the fathers and fatherly figures that have touched your life. Let's celebrate Juneteenth. Give thanks for the freedom we all enjoy as U.S. citizens. Let us learn from history and work together to change the future. Let's not forget to take time to saunter, stop and smell the roses, give yourself time to enjoy life. And while you're out there on your gentle walk, consider this. Is running around all day from one activity to another and never really pausing to take stock really what you want from life? My guess is probably not. Maybe you'll want to have a turkey sandwich today and perhaps even a martini if you're so inclined. And maybe you'll want to test out your design skills and participate in a soapbox derby, or maybe just find other ways to let loose, go crazy, and embrace the fun. Or perhaps you'll simply choose to pick up the comics and pay tribute to this crazy, fun-loving feline, Garfield the Cat, on his special day. For as he said, it's a perfect day, and may we all make it so.